Hey, welcome to part 2 of our relationship chart series. This chart is for Meghan Markle, born August 4th, 1981 at 4:46 a.m. in Canoga Park, California. Meghan is a first house Leo with Cancer rising, which means her moon also rules her chart. The moon is conjunct Saturn and Jupiter in the third house. So the first thing is we are dealing with a first house Leo with the Mercury in the North Node conjunct in Leo in the first house as well. So with first house suns, one of the things that's extremely important in this lifetime has a lot to do with identity. So this is the position of the great I am, being important, being seen as important, being visible, to people, being known to people is extremely important. Both Leos and first house suns, with the sun in Leo, the drive to have a high public profile and be visible to the world and seen as important is going to be extremely important to Ms. Markle. Now, with the sun trying to make, well, it's pretty wide, but we're going to give it a larger orbit because it is the sun. With the sun trining Neptune in fifth house and being in the sign of Leo and Sagittarius, the fifth house is a Leo house. So with sun and Leo trining Neptune in its house, the fifth house, there is a very romantic, almost teenager type quality or way of approaching or dealing with the world. So Meghan Markle in many ways will experience life and go through life very much like a perpetual teenager. And before we get too invested in, oh, that's just blah, 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 so here's the thing. We all love the ability to be that romantic and to be that colorful and to be that free and expressive and playful and experimental and optimistic about the future. It's just that many of us outgrow it as we get older. But we still love that. The difference is a lot of us as we get older are afraid to express that part of ourselves, so we tend to bury that and live that out through the experiences of other people in soap operas or romance novels or high action film sort of stuff. So we're still wanting those qualities. It's just that we tend to project it onto other things so that we experience them at a distance as opposed to personally being invested in that. So I wouldn't come down too hard on her for being a perpetual teenager. And the fact is, she's an actress, and all actors and actresses are essentially perpetual teenagers because that's what Leo does. It's about the stage and the drama and being loved and being applauded for being special. Okay, so that sun trining, making a wide trine in Neptune in the fifth house, gives her a very colorful kind of fluid sort of identity. Okay, with that, since we're using wide orbs, right, that sun also makes a very wide square to Uranus. Now, with the Sun-Uranus square, what you tend to get is somebody who is extremely independent and is not really interested in playing by the rules. And with Leo, Scorpio emphasis here in fixed signs, this is also someone who can be very contrary when they decide that the rules don't make sense or they don't apply to them. Now, the thing that I'm going to say here, and this is a caveat, right, is because these orbs are wide, these are not necessarily the things that we're going to be dealing with in an upfront, in-your-face sort of way. So these are background elements of our personality that are there, but they are not as emphasized. The only reason they're receiving any attention here and they may be more visible is because they are involved with a first house sun, which is everything you can possibly see about this person, like right there in your face. So anything interacting with her sun is going to be more visible, which includes planets that are at wider orbs that we normally wouldn't give that much attention to. Okay, so chart ruler is the Cancer, or ascendant is Cancer, chart ruler is the moon. The chart ruler is conjunct the moons, Saturn, and Jupiter. So what does this tell us? Well, with a chart ruler in Libra, okay, the first thing it tells us is this is somebody who is very relationship oriented. This is not somebody who likes being alone. And this is very much somebody who sees the entire world through their relationships. Now remember, she is a first house sun, so she also measures herself by her relationships. So who she's involved with, whose arm she's on, or who's on her arm, has in her mind a direct reflection of her status and who she is in life. With this conjunct Saturn, this can get a little weird. So Saturn is a co-ruler of Libra, is the ruler of Capricorn, but it's also a co-ruler of Libra. So Saturn in Libra can be a little challenging because you can get the best or the worst of it. With Saturn in Libra, there tends to be a more calculating, mental approach to relationships. These are not people who tend to give their heart away and run on the power of emotion gonads, although they can certainly give that impression. They are less emotionally invested and more mentally invested in a relationship. So there's a lot of mental gymnastics that go into whether they want to get into a relationship with someone and whether they want to be in a relationship with someone. Now remember, her sun is trine Neptune over here in the 5th house. So the theatrical teenage part of herself loves to be in love with love. So there's a tremendous propensity to surrender herself to romance, okay, or the romance of a situation. But when the rubber hits the road, right, we're dealing with her chart ruler conjunct Saturn. And that means that there is nothing she does without a lot of serious consideration and measurement about how this person fits into her life, and what value they bring to it. And because it's in the sign of Libra, how this reflects on her. How does this relationship reflect on her in terms of her status in the world? Now, Saturn in Libra does have a good side. So Saturn in Libra, because Saturn is exalted in Libra, can also mean that this is somebody who operates with a tremendous amount of integrity in their relationship. So this could mean somebody who only gets involved in relationships when they really feel like this is the right thing to do, and they're bringing their best self to the table, and there's a genuine, actual commitment that they're willing to give to this relationship. So with Saturn in Libra, we get literally one of two extremes. We either get the mercenary who uses everyone and everything around them, or we get the person who doesn't enter relationships unless they're absolutely sure and they've done all the calculations necessary to make sure that this relationship has a really strong potential and is worth investing into. The difference, I suppose, is that with a Saturn Libra placement like this, and especially the chart ruler conjuncting Saturn Libra, one of the ways to gauge which side of the coin this is by looking at how frequently this person is in a relationship. So is this somebody who is serially monogamous? Literally somebody who jumps from one relationship to the other, to the other, to the other, because they don't want to be or don't know how to be alone, right? So there's very short gaps of time when they're not in a relationship. Or is it somebody who has significant relationships and long breaks before they get into another relationship, and all their relationships tend to be very serious and have a lot of weight, unless it's like, the casual one or two dates sort of thing, that don't really count as relationships because they're just social dates. They're trying on for size sort of thing. So I don't know that much about Meghan Markle. Maybe some of you guys out there who are royal watchers know more about her history than I do, and you can kind of fill in the blanks here. But if she has the personality, it tends to have long gaps between relationships, with a lot of superficial one or two date kind of things in between, then we're probably, not absolutely, but probably dealing with somebody who's operating from the integrity side of Saturn and Libra. If she has a history of being a serial monogamist, meaning she literally goes from one relationship to the other, and they're all very serious to her, and there's only little short gaps of time between those relationships, if there's any gap at all. Sometimes with Saturn and Libra, on that side of the coin, you get somebody who literally won't leave a relationship until they have one waiting in the wings, because they use people. They can't exist by themselves, and they need somebody else to hang on to carry them, because they're not doing the work. So if it's that, then if that's the history or the timeline for her, then that's the side of Saturn that we're dealing with. I wish I knew more about her history, but I haven't been paying much attention. I've had other things going on like, US politics, Jesus. Now, with Jupiter in Libra also conjunct this moon, this is a very nice placement. So with Jupiter in Libra, for everybody, there's a tremendous benefit from relationships. So people with Jupiter and Libra are very good with people. They're very extroverted, they're very social, they're very charming. They know how to bring out the best in people. They know how to get people to warm up to them and want to do things for them. You can see how this can be very dangerous with Saturn and Libra there too, right? And that chart ruler conjuncting both of them. Jupiter and Libra also, it benefits from relationships. So Jupiter and Libra also tends to, at least in theory, give us a more higher principles, a more elevated view of what a relationship should be, idealistically, and more idealistic, I guess is a good way to put it, and certainly very optimistic in relationships. So the optimism will certainly go in with this teenager type quality to her mentality that we see her operating through life with. So she will optimistically go from one relation to the other, assuming that this one will be the fairy tale romance she's looking for. Jupiter and Saturn together tends to be the optimist and the cynic in the same room. So it can have some weird expressions. So on the one hand, with Saturn and Jupiter conjunct in Libra, you can have somebody who, again, is a mercenary. They use everyone, everything around them. They're very charming. They know how to endear themselves to people and get people to want to do things for them. Like, they're very good at manipulating people like slot machines, right? Or you can have the other side of Saturn and Jupiter, which is somebody who operates with a tremendous amount of integrity in their relationships and has very high ideals about what a relationship should be and operates from that position. Which of these this is, it's hard to say, but her history might tell us a little bit more. Unfortunately, I don't know her history, so you guys might have a better sense of that than I do. Now, what's interesting is if you look here, right? So we have Mars in Cancer squaring these planets. So, and again, this is kind of wide with the moon, but it's involved in this, it's definitely involved in this square with this stellium right here in the third house. So this is something to make a note of. So Mars in Cancer by itself can be problematic because Mars in Cancer is a very passive-aggressive sign. Mars is how we assert ourselves. It's how we get stuff done. It's our temper. It's our shows of aggression. Cancer is sneaky. Cancer doesn't do anything in a direct line. Cancer does everything sideways and from behind the scenes and around. So Cancer will never be direct with you. Cancer likes to hint and make suggestions and kind of manipulate you into doing what they want you to do. Mars in Cancer, with that said, Mars in Cancer makes for a very passive-aggressive sort of display of temper. So they won't, Mars in Cancer will not go on a full frontal attack. Mars in Cancer will undermine you and sabotage you. Mars in Cancer is not a healthy placement. So one of the things that we know looking at this chart is that very early on, Meghan Markle learned that a direct expression of her annoyance, irritation, desires, frustrations, anything that was a direct expression of the things that were very important to her and made her vulnerable were not things that she wanted to show. Also, remember, with all this down here, she would have learned very early on that there were easier ways to get things done that left less blood on her hands. So she's a bit of an operator. I'm not sure how I feel about her. And I haven't looked at the relationship comparison yet, the comparison between the charts, but we'll take a look at. On the surface, she's very charming and certainly very appealing, and I like the idea of Meghan Markle. I'm not in love with this chart. Mars in Cancer in the 12th house. Mars in the 12th house, period, is a very weak sign. So Mars in the 12th house is very confrontation avoidant. This is not somebody who likes confrontation. And will go out of their way up to the point of lying to get out of having to deal with confrontation, right? This is not their thing. Mars in Cancer in the 12th house, this person will literally bend over backwards and do all sorts of psychological gymnastics to manipulate situations and people to navigate minefields so that they don't have to have open confrontation or conflict, when it comes to things that they feel are important, because drives you to the things that are important to you, and that's how we get things done. So Mars and Cancer in the 12th house, squaring all these third house Libra planets, especially with her chart ruler, right? So her chart ruler is now squaring the planet in the sign of its rulership, right? So the moon rules Cancer, and the moon is squaring Mars in Cancer, and it's the chart ruler. So we've got a bit of a mess here. So this tells me right here, right, actually right there, this right here tells me there's a huge conflict. She has a real difficulty. I'm not going to say telling the truth, but I will say she has a very real difficulty being very clear and direct about what it is that she wants or means. So she'll never be like straightforward about stuff. So you would have to be a bit of a mind reader or something to kind of keep up with this. With Mars and Cancer at 12th house, and Saturn here in the third, there's a huge propensity to keep stuff to herself or leave information out. So sins of omission versus sins of deception. So she's a real good one for log jamming information, the silent treatment, and withholding. With Mars and Cancer in itself is very withholding. Mars and Cancer in 12th retreats and withholds. Saturn in the third absolutely locks up information and won't give it to you. So it's stonewalls. So she would be very good about keeping secrets. She would be very bad about being upfront and on the table with everything, because she's never going to put it all on the table. So there's constantly holding back pieces of information. I'm not, in case it's not obvious, I'm not in love with this chart. I like Meghan Markle. I like the idea of Meghan Markle. I am not in love with this chart. Okay. So, now, interestingly enough, when we're talking about communication and information, withholding information, so here's the thing. She's got Mercury conjunct the North Node in the first house, in Leo. So what this does, the North Node tells us about our evolutionary dance. This is what we're here to master, get better at, learn. This is the gate we have to pass through in order to successfully move on to our next incarnation with the least amount of baggage from this one, okay? With the North Node conjunct Mercury, one of the things that she is here to do is to learn to, ready? Talk, but not talk in a carefully crafted, manipulative way. The Leo is the heart center, okay? And Leo is very much about speaking from the heart and being authentic, okay? So Mercury conjunct the North Node in Leo is very much about learning to speak in a very authentic, heart-centered way, being honest about who we are and where we're at and what we want. Being more direct, the very things that she's so not good with. These are the things that she's going to have to master in order for her to get through this life successfully and move on to the next one with the least amount of issues. Otherwise, she ends up living in her South Node in Aquarius. And the South Node in Aquarius in the 7th house is a weak position, because South Node in Aquarius, first of all, the South Node in the 7th house, right? Right there is a codependent position. And anybody who's familiar with codependent relationships will tell you that in a codependent relationship, you can't tell the truth. You can't be honest about what you want. You can't assert yourself. You can never express your anger. So you're constantly living as if your life hung on the whims of the person that you're involved with. So there's never an ability to be authentic or independently you. Okay? So the South Node in the 7th house makes for codependence. With Aquarius, which is the sign of groups and people, this is public opinion. Which is interesting because she is in the acting field. She's a professional actress, right? Which is all about public opinion. So her South Node in Aquarius, let's change this up real quick. The South Node in Aquarius in the 7th house is all about public opinion. She is an actress, right? 5th house, okay? And that is very much all about public opinion. And yet, in this lifetime, what she has to learn to do is to be honest and to speak from her heart and to stand firm in who she is and what's important to her. That's that Leo, that North Node in Leo. Okay? And with a Mercury there, this is very much about communication and what she's saying, right? And more specifically, what she's not saying. This is further emphasized or reinforced, all of this evolutionary demand, by Mercury ruling that third house, which is the house of communication, right? And how we speak and the things that are important to us. And also the 12th house, which is the house of what's hidden. It's a psychological house. It's all, it's also skeletons in our closet, but in this particular case, her 12th house also has a lot to do with the things that she doesn't want to reveal. The secrets that she keeps even from herself. So getting honest with herself is even more important than being honest with other people, because this indicates that this is somebody who's very, very good at lying to themselves, about what matters. And remember, her South Node is in Aquarius in that 7th house, okay, which is all about public opinion, okay? And anybody who is familiar with these personalities or has been this personality, you know that when everything in your life is about what other people think of you, it's very difficult, if not impossible, to get to that place where you understand like what really is important to you. Getting honest with yourself, okay, becomes the biggest challenge of all when you're here in a codependent relationship with the people around you and everything's about other people's opinions of you. So this is a big challenge for her, especially that considering she is stepping into a role where the court of public opinion is constantly putting her on trial. And keeping up facades and, not being necessarily, authentically herself, is part of the job. So it will be interesting to see how she fits into this role in this marriage into a royal, very public and very royal family. It's very easy to have separate lives when you're a professional actress, because once you're off the clock, you can try to maintain some semblance of personality. But England is a very small country. I mean, basically, it's part of an island. And the royal family is very visible. So maybe Harry, with all of his 8th house privacy, Scorpio privacy stuff, will be able to teach her a thing or two about keeping her personal life and her public life separate more efficiently so that she can learn to work with that Mercury North Node in the 1st house. But when it comes to relationships, it's still going to be an issue. So, and the reason I say this is look over here. Saturn, remember this Saturn, this is all we've been talking about so far, rules her 7th house. So in her relationships, again, issues of codependency are an issue that she would have to work through in this lifetime. Integrity is an issue she would have to work through in this lifetime and have to operate with if she's going to get anything good out of her relationships. It's very easy with this placement, because they're very good at it. They're naturally good at it, to go the easy, underhanded route and just use people. It's not even that they try. It's just that people respond to them in this way. So it's very easy to just let people do stuff for you. And integrity in relationships and some stronger sense of ethics, okay, because Jupiter is there too, and Saturn's exalted, is critical for her to have healthy relationships, or she will forever be in that South Node, and this dysfunctional square. All right, so Saturn rules that 7th house. Saturn is in Libra, and it's in the 3rd. So what does this also tell us? Okay. No, hold that thought. We're going to come back to that, because that's very much about relationships. All right. So the moon needs to be in a relationship. The moon likes being in a relationship. The moon functions better when it's in a partnership or relationship with someone or something. So Meghan is always going to work hand in hand or in tandem with someone else. Not necessarily groups of people. Groups are not her thing. She works better in one-on-one relationships. Again, this feeds in the whole possibility of codependency, depending on how this works out and how emotionally healthy she is. But this is, a situation for all of us when we have this kind of emphasis. And relationships and partnerships in this sense does not necessarily mean romantically. It can also be a partnership in terms of working with an agent, or working with a coworker, or working with a business partner, or working with your kid if you're a single parent. Partnership takes on many different forms, but ultimately it's that one-on-one, you and me against the world, type of commitment to each other, working in tandem with each other, coordinating with each other, is where she is best and most comfortable at. So in this case, this will make marriage easier for her, and also given that this type of lockstep dovetail formation is what Harry is looking for in a marriage, this would make it very easy for her to appear to be that person for him. Okay, so now she has Venus in Virgo in that third house. Venus in Virgo is very prim and proper, and Venus in Virgo in relationships, more than being old-fashioned, Venus in Virgo is very interested in propriety and doing things the right way. So there is a specific timeline that she sees in her head. There's specific things that have to happen in a certain order. She's got a list of deal breakers as far as who she'll get involved with that are a mile long. Venus in Virgo is excessively hypercritical in terms of what they will and will not tolerate in a relationship. Like, a perfectionist is an understatement. Okay. Intelligence, believe it or not, grammar and the ability to use the spoken language or the written language correctly is extremely important to her. She's a grammar Nazi. And manners, good manners, is extremely important to her. Not just because she's got Venus and Virgo in the third house, but also because she's got this heavy Libra emphasis. So decorum, manners, propriety, the social graces, being able to be graceful socially, all of these things are extremely important to her and are huge deal breakers when they're not present. So literally, you could be the heathen, with a heart of gold, right? Like out of Beauty and the Beast, but it does not matter if you are socially clumsy. On the other hand, if you are a charming bastard, who is so socially graceful, you're more slippery than a fish, she would probably still end up dating you because she could overlook the fact that you've got a black heart. Because you know which set of silverware to use, like at a dinner table, right? Which placement setting. Anyway. But, she's got issues. So, and listen, we've all got issues. Well, let's not come down too hard on her. But, her issues have a lot to do with appearances. Because remember, she's coming out of this thing that's about public opinion and what other people think of her versus her own identity. She's here to develop a strong sense of identity, which is not going to be so easy for her. So all of that makes perfect sense in that context. Okay, now with this third house emphasis, one of the other things that's very, and with the first house, one of the things that's very notable about her is that she's very mental. This is all in her head. So there's a very strong Gemini influence, lots of talking, lots of little sound bites, lots of little communications. She likes to have her finger on the pulse of things, but she doesn't necessarily like to get too heavy into things, which will be interesting given that Harry is such a skin diver. Like, Harry is a deep sea diver. Like, he goes in and he goes deep immediately because he's looking for bottom, if there is one. And if he can't find it, he's going to keep going until he finds it. And that is not her nature. Her nature is more light, more superficial, more chatty, more, air and sunshine and, flowers. And why do we have to get so heavy about stuff? She is you had two sides of a coin, and one side was very deep and dark and intense and constantly rooting around in the muck to find out what's really in there. And the other side was very la 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 la, rainbows and unicorns and flowers, la 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 la. She would be that side. So it will be interesting to see how these two charts line up with each other. That makes it even possible for them to communicate on a regular basis, given that her nature is not one of depth or intensity. She's very serious, and she's got a lot of commitment to her relationships, but she does not, looking at this chart, does not have the depth that we associate with Harry. And I don't know how long those two very, very different types of personalities will be able to get along over the long term. Because at some point, people start looking for the things that their partner cannot offer them that are very important to them. And it doesn't mean there's anything wrong with our partners. It just means that we need stuff they can't give us. So that could be challenging. Dun, dun, in the future. So we'll see how that plays out. Okay, now, where was I going with this? So she has Pluto in the fourth house. Pluto is not, as far as I'm concerned, Pluto is not very active in her chart. She's not a Plutonian person. So I wouldn't give it a whole lot of weight in here. The other astrologers might. You certainly can. I don't. I don't see any heavy emphasis of Plutonian qualities, and I also don't see any activation of this Pluto short of a very small sextile to Neptune, which doesn't really, it's not useful. All the emphasis here is this Gemini house, this third house Gemini air sign stuff, and Mercury, right? Okay. So for that reason, I'm going to skip Pluto. It's not important to me. So which now leaves us with Uranus and Scorpio. So Uranus and Scorpio is in the fifth house, and is Uranus making any aspects? Not really. It is making a sextile to Pluto. And it's more or less. No, it's not even. The only thing Uranus is really doing is making a sextile to Pluto. So let's take a look at that. All right. So before we get into that, the fifth house is Scorpio, okay? And we have Uranus and Scorpio in the fifth. So Scorpio on the fifth, we're looking at Mars and Pluto as its ruler. So Mars is here in the 12th house, and Pluto is there in the fourth. These are both in water houses, okay? So Mars and Pluto both being co-rulers of Scorpio, or that fifth house, means that she can, hang on, let me sort this out. She can give the appearance of being very deeply emotionally invested in her relationships. Now, I'm going to come back to this in a second, but here's something interesting I want to show you guys, right? Uranus in that fifth house in Scorpio. So Uranus in the fifth house is prone to passionate, intense, whirlwind love affairs. Uranus in Scorpio lends itself to really unexpected, bizarre, or unconventional hookups or relationships. So there's a couple of things that go with that. So with Uranus in the fifth house, okay, that in of itself, we would look for somebody who's very sexually experimental, who likes pushing the boundaries, who likes pushing the limit, who likes experimenting, who likes shock value. They like seeing what they can get away with, or what they can do. So there's, in that respect, she's very similar to Harry. But in her case, this tends to show up in the arena of sex and romance and play and creativity. So creatively, she would be able to draw on that, and she would be able to take that experimental, curious, boundary pushing kind of desire and energy and fearlessness and put it into how she pulls inspiration from things, okay, or expresses these things. In relationships, with whole short-term flings and hookups, she's very capable, in spite of that prim and proper Venus and Virgo, right, and all this Libra. She's very capable of having some pretty out there affairs and flings that are very, very short term. And, just literally random. So I'm sure she's had an interesting personal life. She's certainly capable of it. But with that Venus and Virgo in that third house, you'll never know, because she's so prim and proper, in person, right? Now, with that said, remember that fifth house is ruled by Mars and Pluto in the water houses. So with that Uranus and Scorpio in the fifth and Mars and Pluto in the water houses, this is somebody who loses themselves in their short-term affairs. However, what happens is once the dust settles and this becomes officially a real relationship, right? That's when all of this kicks in. Once all of that new car smell is gone, once the novelty of the new romance is over, and now we're transitioning into full-on relationship, that's when all this Moon, Saturn, Jupiter, Libra stuff kicks in, And now she's really calculating out the list, like who is this person, how does this look for me to be involved with this person, what are they bringing to the table, do they meet my checklist, like, and then it goes to like the whole list of what is the word, I just forgot it. I just used it. The thing where you're where you've decided, like, deal breakers, the whole list of deal breakers. So here's the thing. Typically, we all do this. Like in the throes of a new relationship and hormones and romance and excitement, like we lose ourselves in these things. We're all excited and optimistic. And as soon as things settle down and get to be a little more familiar, then we start noticing all the stuff we didn't pay attention to before. And that's when we start asking ourselves, like, can I really sustain a lifetime relationship with this person? Like, what was I thinking, right? We all do this. The difference is, in her particular case, when she starts these relationships, she jumps in head first, like life depended on her having this passionate experience with this person. And literally, things will cool off just as quickly and abruptly and unexpectedly, and she'll lose interest like that, like snap of the fingers, gone, done, not interested anymore. And then she'll start doing the mental calculations, like, ooh, do I really want to be seen in public with this person? Like, I don't know. Like, what are people going to think? Da, 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 da. And that's all this kicks in. So what typically takes you and I, well, maybe not me, but get Uranus in my chart too. What typically takes the normal person weeks or months to kind of process and transition into, from the new relationship fling excitement to, well, okay, is this really workable? For her, could take a date or 2 dates, maybe 3. And her flings would all be very behind the scenes. Like, Uranus is in Scorpio. It's a very secretive position. Uranus is an exhibitionist, but Scorpio is private and secret. So maybe in secret, in private, she's an exhibitionist. But what this also means in terms of flings, hookups, is this would all be, she's more excited by the taboo and the off limits and people she's not supposed to be with, and the whole sneaking around kind of thing, and whatever. And it has a very short shelf life. It's over as fast as it starts, because it doesn't take her long to like get through whatever that wild hair is, and then go, oh, wait a minute, stop, time out before we go any further. Like, do I really want to do this? So there's that. And listen, no slut shaming in this house. So y'all that are out there like, oh my God, what kind of, stop it. Just stop it. The fact of the matter is, listen, if you were completely honest with yourself, you would be doing the same thing if you thought you could get away with it. But many of us are not in the position to have those kinds of opportunities because of the way we were brought up and the shame that's associated with being able to be wholly sexual women. Or we live in environments where everybody knows everybody, so you got a lot more restrictions about that kind of situation or circumstances presenting themselves. Or we just won't let ourselves have any fun, or we just don't pull in those kind of attractive partners. So we're just going to judge everybody else for having fun that we can't have. So listen, whatever your thing is, resist the urge to slut shame Meghan for things we're speculating about. We don't even know. We were not one of her hookups, so we don't know. We're speculating. So for other people who carry Uranus and Scorpio in the 5th house, also, again, no slut shaming. And again, this is all speculation. And listen, unless you're one of their hookups, you don't know. So just stop yourself. Stop yourself. And admit that you're jealous, that they're having all kinds of sexy, freaky fun that you're not. And that's why you're judging. So there. Yeah. Okay. All right, so now when we transition into the 7th house, and we're talking about relationship, right? And all this Libra stuff kicks in. Oh boy, right? Because remember, that 1st house is involved. Everything in our life is about relationships, right? And being part of a relationship, how this relationship reflects on her. Because the 3rd house is also the immediate environment. So, it literally, put this in here. So for her, literally, her concern with public opinion is not necessarily public opinion at a distance, but literally it's so close to her and so highly exaggerated that even like people she works with, and her neighbors and her siblings and her cousins and her friends, their opinions matter too. Like, what will they think? Oh my God, what a horrible way to live. But I guess for some people it works. The other thing is that with all the 1st and 7th together in that 3rd house, this also usually, not always, but usually indicates somebody that gets involved with a high school sweetheart, or somebody that they have spent a lot of time with in their local environment, and kind of grow into a relationship with. So it isn't, again, I don't know her history. So if you guys do, please fill in the blanks for the rest of us. There is the possibility that she would have married her high school or college sweetheart, sort of thing. Staying married, as anybody who's ever been married can tell you, is a whole other conversation, but certainly the opinions of the people closest to her that are not necessarily even important to her, the neighbors, the coworkers, the shopkeepers, these things all play into her mental calculations about who she's willing to have a relationship with. Okay? Now, the other thing that I thought was interesting about this chart, okay, is that her midheaven, because I knew I started to ask about relationships and public status, and also, too, marrying into royalty from being a commoner is a huge elevation in status, right? Like, holy cow. So Mars rules her 10th house, which is the house of public standing or your reputation, okay? And Mars, remember we talked about this dysfunctional Mars, is here in 12th house in Cancer. So with Mars squaring all of these planets, this makes for some interesting speculation. And again, this is speculation, right? So the ruler of our reputation, our public standing, is in a weak position because Mars does not like being in Cancer. It is in the 12th house, which again is another weak position because that's a Pisces house. So her Mars, which rules her midheaven or professional reputation, is just weak. So one of the things that I would have expected to be more prominent about her would have been slander, a lot of slander and gossip about her from day one, literally from being young, moving forward. Constant problems with that. Also, this is such an Achilles heel right here. It's such a problem, right? Also, with this, okay, with the Saturn, which rules the 7th house, and the Moon, which rules the 1st house, and then Jupiter rules what? The 6th? So, and the 9th. So here are some things. So all of this slander, right, and gossip, and this malicious undermining, which may not even be deserved, because Mars in this sign, in this house, together no less, like definitely is, the position of the sacrificial lamb. So she's literally scapegoated a lot with this particular position. Now, granted, some of this, because we talked about this, may be her own doing. If she's operating from the less integrity-driven side of those Libra planets. But if she is operating from the more integrity-driven side, she is still going to have to deal with being scapegoated and slandered and maligned frequently from childhood on. And where these things will be coming from will be, one, her relationships, right? So she's got to be very careful who she gets involved with, because whether it's a 5th house affair or a 7th house affair, those people are not going to be kind to her when the relationship is over. She does not have that kind of luck. Some people, I swear to God, they can get involved with, anybody and do the worst of things, and these people will still go out of their way to not malign their reputation. Other people, it doesn't matter how good you were to them and how horribly they treated you, they still will talk about you like a dog and make it look like you were the horrible person. You just can't win with this stuff. So, and that's her Mars right here. So she's always going to have a problem with former relationships. Okay. Now, the other thing is that this also, because this involves the 3rd house, siblings are going to be an issue as well. Get rid of all this. Siblings are definitely going to be an issue. So she's going to have constant problems, because if she has siblings, she's going to have constant problems because of her siblings. And there could also be a lot of undermining and a lot of sabotage and a lot of manipulation involved and around these relationships with the siblings. These would be toxic relationships. This would not be a good thing for her, which is unfortunate. And, as horrible as it is, this is going to be a lifelong problem for her. So if that does pop up, especially where siblings are concerned, I would probably give her more of a break. Because the sibling may actually prove to be the problem significantly more than she is. So there's a lot going on here karmically speaking. And also there's with this particular position, there's something weird about those relationships that's, I don't know. I'm not going to get into that because now we're getting too deep into this. And also, because we're talking about Jupiter and Saturn, that's part of this square. Jupiter rules that 6th and 9th, okay, and Saturn rules the 7th. If she makes the mistake of getting involved with coworkers, right, that will come back to bite her on the butt in a bad way. So people that she has worked with, if she makes the mistake of having an affair with anyone she works with, that is going to be another tremendous source of undoing. So she's got a lot of stuff here that really kind of puts her on the cross, because on the one hand, she has to act with absolute integrity. On the other hand, apparently everybody else around her does not have to and probably will not. So she has to be the better person, even though the people around her are not going to be at every opportunity. So that is, I thought that was interesting. That is unfortunate. So we will see how this plays out for her now that she's going into an extremely high status relationship, which will certainly make more predatory personalities finding her a lot more attractive as a target. So we'll see. Okay, so this has the chart for Meghan Markle. And we're going to end this here, and then we're going to go into a separate video, and we're going to look at the two Harry and Meghan's chart together.